In this week's episode, we're going to teach you how to create a successful, healthy deer herd on your property.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
QDM stands for
Quality Deer Management.
Excellent. You got it right.
Okay.
Now, there's 4 things that make up quality deer management, or principles, cornerstones, if you will. And that is hunter management, pretty important, right?
Yeah.
You have habitat management, which we all like to concentrate on, maybe a little bit too much.
Right.
Then there's herd monitoring, which is a little bit more detailed. And the last one that should be really, after habitat management, we should really be concentrating on and putting a lot of emphasis is harvest management or herd management.
Right. It's funny, when I thought about QDM when I was first introduced to the practice many years ago, and to this day, when I think of quality deer management, I think about shooting deer. Not antlered deer, but shooting antlerless deer. When I think of quality deer management, of those 4 cornerstones, the first 2 that come to mind for me are habitat management, doing the habitat work, and then doe management, harvesting a healthy, adequate number of does off of your property.
Yeah, and that's something where, you know, Cody and I have talked in the past about, you know, the QDM philosophy has maybe kind of branched off, and it's become a little bit of a mixture of a QDM and trophy management concept. And a lot of people, as of late, you go on social media, you see the trend where the harvest management is not getting really done. And if you look at state agencies' numbers, the populations in many states are increasing because of lack of harvest management, and that is more specifically shooting an adequate amount of does on your property. And we all know if you shoot a number of does off your property and keep that population in check, you will have a healthy deer herd. Your habitat will be, you know, sustainable, and quality standards are up. But we have to do our work and be diligent on those harvest management guidelines.
That's right. That's one thing I've always said, and it sounds backwards, but the best thing you can do for whitetail deer is to shoot whitetail deer.
Simple as that.
And it sounds so backwards to say that the best thing that you can do for a species that we care so much about and invest so much in is to kill that animal. But the thought process behind the best thing you can do for whitetails is to shoot whitetails is to look at the big picture, look at the overall species. Don't focus so much on individual animals within the species. That's not to say that you don't care about a doe or an animal that you just shot, because as we all know, killing an animal, it is a heavy act. It's not something that you should do casually or indifferently. But when you shoot a whitetail deer, you're doing the best thing for the species, because as you mentioned, and as we'll talk about, you're creating a healthy deer herd. You may have removed one animal from the herd, but as a result, all the other remaining animals are going to optimize their full potential. You're going to take pressure off of your native habitat, which that habitat is in turn going to support the remaining animals to their optimal potential. And as we'll discuss too, it creates a better hunting experience as well.
So let's dive into those things. We mentioned a couple. When you harvest, let's just say doe management, okay? So let's talk about bucks, because that's what we all want to talk about, right? That's the end result of everything. So that is a simple thing. Let them go so they can grow. Trophy is in the eye of the beholder. You can't shoot 180-inch deer if you're shooting 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds every year. So with that being said, but the trophy is in the eye of the beholder. QDM is a ladder, you know, and you want to go one rung at a time. When we skip rungs, what happens? We fall, we hurt ourselves. So just slow and steady, but we have to do that work. Again, let's dive into doe management. We mentioned a couple things. When we lower the deer herd, we have better quality of animals, and better quality and sustainable habitat that we put so much effort in on the weekends and all that stuff, okay? So that's one of them. Okay? And the other one we mentioned is just the quality of the animal. We'll have, you know, all those resources are going to, as Cody mentioned, other animals. You know, that less mouths to feed, healthier animal, weight, just overall health in general, you will see.
Well, we've talked about what habitat is in previous videos: food, water, cover, space. And stress, as you've mentioned before, and you've always taught me, that stress dictates everything in a whitetail deer's life. And on a piece of property within a deer's home range, there is a finite number of resources that can are available to the deer herd for them to reach their optimal potential, and that comes in the form of food, water, cover, space. If there are too many deer on a piece of property or within their home range that the habitat cannot support that number of deer, as a result, those deer are going to suffer. They're going to be stressed animals. They may not look like it because deer are so adaptable. That is a positive in their direction, but as we mentioned, there is a limited number of resources, and if there are too many mouths to feed, too many deer in too much space, those animals are going to be stressed.
Yeah, and we have to remember when it comes to food, because that's what it boils down to in the whitetails world, is that there's primary food sources, secondary, and starvation plants. And just because we see deer eating certain things, that might not be necessarily the primary food source. So lowering those deer numbers down has multiple benefits, and that's something that we should all strive for. But that being said, the biggest thing in today's world is that, we have like maybe 10, 12 deer that we have to kill off our property to sustain a good, healthy, quality population.
Right.
What in the world am I going to do with 12 deer?
Right.
And I don't even have that many tags. What do I do with tags? Oh my gosh. And that's where actually we kind of make things harder than what they have to be to accomplish lowering those populations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It sounds easy in principle to say, well, I'm just going to go out and shoot a bunch of deer and solve all my problems. But as you mentioned, we're only allowed a limited number of tags. Even if you're like me and you really enjoy eating deer meat, you can only eat so much of it as a single person. So what do we do with all these deer?
Well, that's a good question. And there are so many solutions to that problem. You just have to think outside the box and do things sometimes that you're maybe not comfortable with. And that is number one, allowing more people onto your property. Yes, I said it. Allowing more people onto your property. There's so many youth. You contact a state agency, they have a long list of people wanting to get into hunting, whether it's organic eating or food or whatever. There's a long list. You can be what they call a mentor. We need bodies out there hunting. And there's only 11.5 million of us. It fluctuates up and down. That's not a lot of us. So we need the sportsman to be created, and you can actually be a mentor. Allow people onto your property with your guidance and to harvest those does.
Right.
And teaching those people how to take care of it after you do shoot it. That is what we call being a mentor. Then the last thing, I think it's very simple. And that is there's Farmers and Hunters Feeding the Hungry programs, FHFH. And there's so many other programs out there throughout the country where you can harvest your deer, or other people that come onto your property harvest deer, and you can donate these animals, and they will not be wasted.
Yeah, both of those options that you mentioned, being a mentor and allowing access to your property, as well as donating the meat. Down here in Virginia, it's called Hunters for the Hungry, as you mentioned. The same principle, it applies under an umbrella of different names depending on your state or region or locale, but both of those options are also really satisfying. As a hunter, as a landowner, to know that you're making a positive difference for the habitat and the wildlife, and specifically the whitetail deer on your property, but you're also providing a better future for our hunting heritage. Introducing somebody to the sport, or access, is a big limiting factor for a lot of hunters getting into hunting these days. There are a lot of people who want to go hunting, but where do you go?
Yes.
Public land is full of hunters anymore, and private land is becoming more privatized because, as we talked about, we always shy away from letting people onto our property. So giving people access and getting them involved in the sport while improving our hunting heritage and improving habitat and wildlife, that's a really satisfying win-win situation.
So one of the final things to talk about where it reference, harvest management, is the hunting aspect of it, right?
That's right.
What deer do I shoot? What does do I shoot? Do I shoot all the young ones? Do I shoot all the old ones? What do I do?
Right, that's a big part of harvest management within the QDM philosophy, harvesting a healthy number of does. We talked about how that can improve the quality of the habitat on your property. It can improve the quality of life for the deer on your property that you don't shoot. But if you're like us, like a big reason we got into QDM and live this lifestyle and philosophy is to enjoy the hunting side of things as well. And it sounds a little backwards to say let's go out and shoot more deer than we have in the past to enjoy better hunts.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you need to do. When there are fewer deer on your property, especially when it comes to the rut and hunting bucks, whatever age class of buck you're after, especially mature bucks, a healthy buck to doe ratio, you're going to see more buck activity, you're going to see more buck sign in the woods, rubs and scrapes. There's going to be more competition for the remaining does in the herd. Bucks are going to have to travel more, we'll have to work harder to find them. All that to say, they're going to move during the daylight more likely, so that there is an endless list of benefits that comes on the hunting side of things from harvesting a healthy number of deer off your property.
Yeah, and when, you know, we always talk about what gets deer those big bucks, what makes those big bucks. Obviously nutrition, age, and the last, you know, one of the things is obviously genetics.
Yeah.
And we forget that, you know, half or over of the genetics comes from does. So it's very important to harvest in an adequate amount of does and keep that genetic flow flowing. So that means shooting an uneven age class. And that's one of the tough things when it comes to quality deer management is shooting those younger deer. It's hard for a lot of people to do that, but it's important to shoot an uneven age class. If I told you like, hey, I want you to shoot a doe tonight, Cody's gonna go out there and shoot a mature doe. Yeah. And it's just because it's hard, right. You know, it's hard.
It is.
But let's just say that doe is 3.5, and I tell Jim to go out there and shoot. And guess what? Jim shoots a 3.5. I tell Tony, I tell all my Italian friends apparently, you know, go out there and shoot. And I tell him to shoot a mature whitetail doe. He's gonna shoot a 3.5, let's just say it's a 3.5. Guess what we just did? We took a whole genetic trait out of the equation.
Right.
So shooting an uneven age class of whitetail deer, that's an important of the genetic flow to keep those genetics moving and flowing.
Right, and it's not to diminish whitetail does, it's not to diminish the does, but when you're out doe hunting, looking to remove females from the herd, a doe is a doe.
Yep.
Whether it's a year and a half up to, it's the ego in us hunters. If we're out, we want to kill the biggest, oldest buck in the woods. We want to kill the biggest, fattest, oldest doe in the woods. But when it comes to herd management and practicing QDM, a doe is a doe, whether it's a year and a half all the way up to those old deer who barely have any teeth left in their jawline. Each one is a trophy. And another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is we always want to wait until later in the season to harvest a doe because we don't want to put pressure on the property. We don't want to inadvertently bump the buck we're hunting, but it has happened to me many years. But we wait, say, oh, I'll wait till after the rut to shoot my does. Those does get shot at and hunted and pushed and chased around for a couple months. They become a heck of a lot harder to hunt and shoot later in the season than they do early. So if you have to shoot 5 does off of your property, hypothetically speaking, shoot them when you get the chance. And honestly, it's probably easier and more likely to hit that mark if you shoot them early and often.
Yeah, and that's a home run right there. Shoot your deer early. It gets the rust off, gets you focused. It doesn't create the situation that Cody just said, because those old does, man, they're like ninjas.
Yeah.
You know, they hear a whisper and they're just like freaking out. So that alone right there, and it leads into the rut. You will have a very intense rut when you practice true quality deer management. Those older bucks, as Cody mentioned and I mentioned, you know, they'll be on their feet. It provides a better hunting opportunity. Doe management.
Yeah. As we mentioned in this video, there are endless benefits to harvesting a healthy, adequate number of does on your property, and that varies from property to property, which we will get into in future videos. You might have 200 acres of pristine habitat that can support a lot of deer, and you may not have to shoot as many. You may have, on the other side of the coin, 200 acres of very poor habitat with a lot of deer, and you need to remove a lot more off of that piece of property. All that to say, there are endless benefits that come with harvesting an adequate number of does off of your property, better hunting opportunities, meat in the freezer, and overall higher quality habitat for all wildlife on your property, and that's what wildlife management is all about.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.